I Tried to Force My Husband into Losing Weight by Hailey and Faye. I've always been concerned about my husband's health. He was overweight since the day we met, but he never really tried to fix it. It wasn't really a concern in the beginning. Sure, being bigger isn't a bad thing, but that's only true until it negatively impacts your health and your ability to function. It wasn't that he needed to fix his weight problem the entire time, but he really should have taken some steps to avoid getting bigger. He ignored the issue for so long that by the time I stepped in, he must have been over 400 pounds. He had trouble walking. He never wanted to get out of bed. In fact, he hardly wanted to do anything at all. I loved the poor guy, but he was a fucking mess. It was ridiculous. He had no motivation to even attempt a diet or exercise. He complained about walking from bed to the bathroom and absolutely despised going outside for any reason. He was slowly killing himself. I couldn't take it. It was painful for me to watch him suffer and literally not give a shit about it. I know it has to be hard to live like that, but he didn't care. He'd been told by myself and the other doctor that he had to prove that he could lose weight through diet and exercise before he could get surgery, and he refused. He would rather be a disgusting recluse at home than do even something simple to fix himself. He hadn't let himself die yet, but he was hardly living at all. One day, I finally had enough. The night before, he had almost rolled over on me in his sleep. It was the last straw for me. He nearly killed me. I couldn't take it anymore, and I needed to take things into my own hands. If he wasn't going to help himself, then I was going to have to do something drastic. There's no way he would be able to continue living this way, at least not for very long. That was the day I told him that I was going to help him solve his problems. He was less than excited. He didn't want to be fixed, because that would mean living life. He didn't care that he could hardly walk. He didn't care that he ate at least 6 meals a day, and he absolutely did not care that he was no longer the person I had fallen in love with. He had become this lazy pig with no desire to live life. The only thing he wanted in the world was to stay in bed, eat food, and watch TV. I wasn't about to let him give up that easy. After the procedure, he would want to stay in shape. Once it was done, there was no way he'd ever want to go back to his repulsive lifestyle. Maybe we'd rekindle our spark. It took me a few weeks, but I finally was able to collect everything I needed from the hospital that I worked in. I set everything up so that he could stay in our bed while I worked. I put him under, and once I was sure that he was entirely unconscious, I began my work. It was a long process, and I wouldn't be able to do everything in one day. Though plastic surgery is my field of expertise, he was a special case. Our home didn't have quite the same amenities as a hospital, some of those which he would need to heal, as per usual. The healing process would need to be done slightly different than it would be if he had actually gone in to get the work done. After the first part of the surgery was done, I waited for him to wake up. I was so excited for him to see what I had done, but it wasn't time yet. I knew he would be hungry when he woke up, so I decided to make him breakfast while he was still under. Knowing him, any dietary restrictions I gave him would be aggressively ignored. I had thought that he would be ravenous as soon as he woke up, and I was correct. The first thing he asked for when he awoke was food. I smiled at him and handed him the plate. He had just lifted a piece of bacon from the plate when I stopped him. "Are you sure you want to eat that, honey? It isn't pork," I said with the sweetest smile I could muster on my face. This would be the true test to see if he was really ready to finally lose all his weight. This would also be the test that proved whether or not he was actually as disgusting as I had come to know. "Well, what is it, hon?" The piece of bacon was dangling from his lips as he asked. "It's human bacon." Do you still want to eat it? This was the moment of truth. I watched, absolutely repulsed, as he took my statement into account and chewed the bacon in his mouth. He savored it for a moment, as though he was trying to discover every aspect of the flavor. Then he stopped. No, I'm not doing this. Go get me some real food. He said it suddenly, as though he'd only just realized that it would be wrong to eat human flesh. I'm not giving you anything else. You can either diet and eat the food that goes with it, or deal with this. I followed up by leaving the room to get him a plate of something healthy. By the time I came back, the plate was empty. I was appalled. I knew he was a pig, but I didn't know he would go to such lengths. I brought you something so you can start your diet. You won't keep the weight off unless you eat healthy, I told him, trying to hide the nausea that coursed through my body. How could he eat that bacon after what I had told him? Could anyone really be so sick? He chuckled for a moment. This is just some kind of trick to convince me to lose weight. I'm fine. I'm not doing your diet nonsense. I like the way that I live now. There's nothing wrong with me. I was shocked at his response, and I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. You've got to be kidding me. You'd rather eat your own flesh than attempt to lose even a little bit of the weight? Don't you want to live the life that we used to have? Don't you miss being able to walk more than 10 steps without being out of breath? I was losing it. He was so adamantly against doing anything to help himself. I told you already, I'm fine. There's no point in lying to me to try to convince me that something is wrong. I do have taste buds, you know. Obviously, this bacon is veal, which is nice because usually you don't go for something so expensive. You ought to feed me better. I need lots of sustenance, you know. I turned and walked out of the room. I was entirely disgusted by his attitude towards everything, and in his disbelief, his voice stopped me as I reached the door. Oh, by the way, hon, I'm still numb from the chest down. That would be the anesthetic, I snipped at him and walked out of the room. Over the next week, all of his meals consisted of meat from his own flesh. He insisted that it was veal and wouldn't believe a thing I said otherwise. At this point, I was too repulsed by his response to continue with it, and I decided to do the one thing that would prove to him that I hadn't lied about feeding him human meat. I went into the room that morning and removed the cloth that kept his paralyzed body hidden from view. Then I removed the bandages that were covering the wounds. "What did you do?" he asked in surprise as he stared at the deep, scabbed-over cuts that covered his once large stomach. "We're running out of fat to get the bacon from. I told you it wasn't veal." "You know what?" he said. "I don't care anymore. Never did. It's the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. If it makes you happy, we can keep doing this." He smiled at me as though it were some enticing offer. That day, I packed a suitcase, I walked out of the house, and I never went home. It's been months now, and I've moved far away. I think I've created a monster.